Mayor Sheevy, can you hear us?
I can now.
Okay.
Ha, I didn't have my microphone on. Sorry.
We'll be starting here in just a few minutes.
Just muting your phone for the moment?
Is Bob coming? Okay, I'll call the Truckee River Flood Management Authority meeting of April the 12th to order with a roll call, please.
Pardon me. There we go. Ron Smith,
Here.
Vaughn Harton,
Present.
Hillary Sheevy
Here.
on the phone. Don Abbott is absent, and in his stead, we have Paul Anderson. Here. Naomi Doerr is absent, and Commissioner Jeannie Herman.
Here.
You have a quorum, sir.
Okay, if you all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Ms. Herman, would you lead us, please?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to the public. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak at this time? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the authority. Approval of the agenda for April the 12th.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Motion
Hartung
by
made the motion.
Hartung.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that was an aye for you, Mayor? She's still on the phone? Mayor Sheevy.
Oh, here. Sorry.
Okay. Was that a?
I apologize. I'm in bed sick and I've got barking dogs, so I'm trying to keep you on mute.
Okay. So we just voted on the agenda, and I was asking if that, you're an aye on that?
Yes,
Okay. It passes unanimously. D, approval of draft minutes of March 8th, 2019 Board of Directors meeting. Anybody want to pull anything? Otherwise, looking for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Did you get those? Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Announcements and clippings. Jay.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to report that we received a financial report from the Corps of Engineers. And I wanted to just briefly state that we have two contracts with the Corps of Engineers. One is for design of the Common Features Project, which is the piece of property by Bristlecone up to the Edison Way property. That Common Features Project, we've talked about it in the past. We have a contract with them for, actually, they have an amount of $6.5 million. We have a lesser contract with them. We have given them $600,000, and to date, they've only spent $80,000, which is it's a good report because they still have over $500,000 left of our money to spend on that. I will add that we are in part of the design work that in the design contract we have with Atkins that also applies to this project. The other contract we have with the Corps of Engineers is the review of our 100-year plan. And that's a $1.4 million contract. We have given them $500,000, and they have spent $80,000 of that. And for the money that they're using for the other portion of that is the money that was given them by Senator Reid a year or two ago. And so they're flush with money on that contract, and which is the review of our 100-year plan. And you all know that, so.
When you say they, I just want to make it clear, that's the Army Corps of Engineers.
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Sacramento District.
So again, I just want to make it clear to the public who are watching, we're paying a governmental entity to review a process for us.
That is a 50-50 cost share. The common features split is 65-35. And yes, we are paying them. It is our obligation as the local sponsor.
Thank you.
If we don't pay them, they don't get it done. That's for sure. We've been paying them for years now. Nobody says it's right, but
I just want the
I know,
public
I know.
to know how the
And-
feds work.
And Mr. Chair, that's all announcements I have.
Jay, let me ask you a question on that $500,000 we gave them, and they only spent $80,000. Why don't we just have them bill us?
Their process, and this is not, there's non-negotiable, but their process is to have the local sponsor, they first do an agreement with the local sponsor, then after the agreement is signed, they ask for a certain advance of funding. So our agreement was for 1.4 million. They didn't ask for all of it. They just said, we want 500,000 to put in the bank, and that way we can pull from either section or either side. And remember, as I said earlier, the cost share is a 50-50 cost share on the study review. On the common features design project, that's a 65-30. So they because of this, they don't like to bill. It's a lot harder for some entities to pay. They don't want to get in that situation where they're in arrears, and so they ask for a certain amount up front, and if you don't pay that, then they just stop all progress on the contract. That's how they work.
Okay.
Non-negotiable.
Any questions or comments for Jay? Are you done, Jay, or do you have?
Yeah, I'm done. That's all I have.
We'll move on to number 2 is consent items. Anybody want to pull an item? Otherwise, looking for a motion?
So moved, Hartung.
We have a motion, looking for a second.
Second.
A second from Herman. We have a motion, second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. Could I ask that that motion include authorization for the executive director to sign those agreements?
It's not listed in any of these here?
No, that's just an addition to, some of those are for his signature as opposed to yours.
Okay.
And I just wanted to be clear on the record that he would be signing.
We can change it. Would you like to add that to your motion?
Motioner agrees for the addition of
Seconder?
the motion.
Yes.
Okay, then I would think we're good to go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Number 3, financial items. Lori, is that you? Discussion and possible action to approve an agreement for professional engineering services with HDR Engineering Incorporated to provide services and support of the United States Army Corps of Engineers, and I won't read the rest of it.
First one is
Jay.
Mr. Walls. Or it's our.
That's you.
That's me. Oh, that's right. Okay. We are still asking for a contract with Mr. Faust. We think
Oh,
that.
no. Jay, we're on item 3.
Item 3A.
Oh, that's, shoot,
down at H.
yeah, you're right. It is mine, sorry about that. We have 2 contracts that we are asking for to be given to HDR. One is a contract that will allow HDR to go back into their archives and also investigate certain questions that the Corps has during the review of our plan. The way that I expect it to proceed is the Corps will take approximately now a year, maybe a year and a half, to completely go through and review our 100-year plan. In order to do this, what happens in the normal course of action is they call us and they say, we need this information. Sometimes the information has to be generated. Sometimes it's information, it's backup information as part of our design back in 2012 and 2013. So what we do is we had 2 contracts that we have basically let fall away. We've just let them expire. We had about $150,000 in contract amount still in those 2 contracts. And we kind of tied them all together into one neat contract that allows us to have HDR serve those purposes to help with the Corps review process. This is up and to the point where the Corps gets their letter out that says, here are your deficiencies. And also, I have asked that certain scope tasks be included in this contract that will allow me to have option to have certain hydraulic analyses performed on behalf of the community and the requests that we get from the community. We have not had that discussion yet, the discussion where whether or not this agency is going to be the review agency for flooding on the Truckee River. And there's a reason for that, and I'm going to bring that up under item number 4, board member comments and requests for future agenda items. But I wanted to have a contract that had the ability that if anything came up and we needed the ability to do some hydraulic work, I could have HDR perform that work based upon the modeling that they have done and performed. And if you've read the staff report, it shows all the actions that we've taken and how we did a full hydraulic design, or not design, but model of the Truckee Meadows watershed. So that's what this particular contract is for.
Did you want to say something? Mr. Hartung?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jay, you mentioned that the Corps will come back and tell us what our deficiencies are.
Good reminder. I wanted to actually explain that.
Please.
What happens is everybody, you all know as elected officials, you understand the development process. You submit an application, planning takes the application and conditions it and gives the condition letter back to the applicant. They make those changes, they get their building permits, and they start building. Very simple, in very simplistic terms, that's the way the Corps will handle this review process. We have given them, although we've had to pay them for that, in essence, the development community has to pay for their reviews as well. But we will we've given them the 100-year plan. We did that 2 years ago. They've, I'll be kind to them and say they have been working on it for 2 years, but I certainly don't know all the ins and outs of how the Corps has performed over the past 2 years. But their review will terminate with a letter of conditions that we need to meet. Now, that means that our plan, our design, our documents all will have to meet this certain letter of a number of conditions. I expect a fairly verbose set of comments coming back from the Corps. When that happens, we will have then a blueprint of what we have to complete in order to make our plan 100% acceptable by the Corps. Now, that's a very key letter, because that letter, once they give us that letter, they can't go back and change things. We are then working from that point forward in fixing our documentation. At that time, we will negotiate with the Corps as to when and who all of this will get done. So, for instance, it could be that the Corps of Engineers says, we want to fix your plan. So we take all of our archived information and we pour it to the Sacramento district. They take that plan and they fix it. and we will end up paying them 50% of that cost. And if they demand to do that, then that's what will happen. They could also say, here's your list of changes that we want to see. Then we will have the obligation of going back to our engineers and say, we need you to do X, Y, and Z. And at this time, I can't say that to our engineers because we don't know what those comments and conditions are going to be. And I need about a year to a year and a half for that to basically simmer, bake, and finish presentation. So this contract gets us to the point from a year to a year and a half that allows us to be able to comply with all the information requests from the Corps, but it doesn't get us through the completion of the document. We will be coming, staff will come back to the board and ask for that, and when that happens, then we will hopefully be completely down the road and ready to go for funding, and the way that we've done our strategies, we'll have the Common Features project going, and it will all be working together, and we'll be holding hands, and life will be beautiful. That's the way that that's the process that has to occur in order for all this to work out.
Jay, for me, I want to, maybe you can address this. We can do everything they ask us to do and be in concurrence with what they want, but we don't have any way to pay for this project right now. That's going to come down to, in the end, how do we do that?
One of the things that we would have discussed back in January, which, I'm planning on doing another workshop this summer. And hopefully when we have the deputy director on board, so that this board can not only give me direction, but also give the deputy director direction, and that individual can help lead the organization into the future. But what I hope to do is present a series of options to the board. One of the options would be build just the federal project, meaning the elements of the project in the Lower Canyon, Vista, all the way up to 395. And that would take care of the commercial areas of both cities, and also provide a workable solution. This board will have to take action in order to do this. And that action would be, you will have to instigate or start a fee, and it may be a bit higher than what we had anticipated in the past, but with the current sales tax and a fee, it is very feasible, especially when we get the infusion of federal monies, it is very possible that we could build the federal portion of our project. And that's the federal portion only. We would not have funds to be able to completely reconstruct all the bridges downtown in Reno. Now, we're not agendized for this, but I have to explain this to you in order to answer the question. And so, yes, there is enough money to build a portion of our project that we have planned, that this body has approved, but there's not enough money to build it all. So that was decided by the public, but as staff, we're trying to be as creative as we can to give this community as much of the project as we possibly can, given the current funding possibilities with the fee and the current sales tax. So that's why we're proceeding. That's why we think that this is the best approach. If it weren't, then the obvious approach would be to cut all ties immediately with the Corps of Engineers. They still have our $1 million in funding, which they would not return, I don't believe. They would, do you think?
Yeah.
Mike knows the contract on that end better than I do.
Under the agreement, they would return any unspent amounts.
So that's the other option, and if this board wants us to move in that direction, I will have an agenda item prepared for next month. But I had hoped.
We can handle that at a workshop, that's.
Yes, that's kind of what I thought, and we will have the deputy director on board to be able to take in everybody and understand everybody's comments and what everybody's concerns are. But that's what these two contracts are for.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Okay, looking for a motion to accept the report.
And again, could I please ask that authorize the executive director to sign?
And it's not just accept the report, but also
To approve the agreement.
to approve the agreement.
There's
Correct.
there's $100,000. So on that though, Jay, what I'm hoping is, and you've said that we'll get a verbose list. I believe that this is why we've hired HDR though, is to make sure that that list is as small as possible. Otherwise, we'll just submit the application to them. We don't need HDR, let them come back, and then we can hire HDR.
I would maybe have told you differently 10 years ago, but as I sit and watch the core team now looking at our documents and knowing that HDR had used core employees for doing this work. These are individuals that knew precisely what the Corps has done, what their methods are, and yet a new set of 21 and 25-year-olds are looking at this and coming up with off-the-wall types of comments. Now,
So what you just described to me is they're making the rules up along the way? I'm sorry,
it's not a bad comment, but I'm just saying that they will bring things up and say, we need to do this, we need to do this, and
Isn't there a code book, as it were, that we follow and you know, and I'm not trying to take it to its simplest form, but you know, you sort of look down the code book and check the boxes off. And I recognize each project is an individual. I get that. I get that each project has specific features and protective features. I get that. But I guess we're just stuck because the Corps is the Corps, and that's the way the federal government does it.
I will answer that question in this manner. Working for numerous cities, numerous counties in my career, the thickness of the development standards approaches 1 to 2 inches of manuals. You've got hydraulic manuals, hydrology manuals, and that. I literally had the National Engineering Manual in my office 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and it was this big. So what I am saying is there's an awful lot of pages and an awful lot of processes and methodologies that they use. You have to be able to speak to them on their terms. You have to be able to negotiate with them, and it is a give and take process. And for this reason, many communities will not touch federal money that comes from the Corps of Engineers for that reason, just because of the difficulty that ensues by doing so. This community elected in basically 1996 when they passed when the community passed when the Corps of Engineers, through Senator Reed's urging, started a new GRR process, and this community supported that notion. We have been in lockstep with the Corps for that amount of time. It is a long time. The good thing is Senator Reed ensured that we would not have a huge tab run up and nothing to show for it. So if we don't ever come up with an agreed to contract with the Corps of Engineers, there's about $22 million sitting out there that we could potentially owe the federal government that we won't have to pay just because of what Senator Reed did for us. So we're in an okay situation. We have spent money, and I don't even want to venture to say how many millions, but it's not that many, certainly not 20 million. And I dare say it's probably over 5 with the Corps. So again, this is one of those discussion points that is better suited for a workshop, and this body has supported this notion, this strategy. We got the authorization in 2014, and we were able to get the Section 1036 that allows our plan to be reviewed by the Corps. They will eventually deem it worthy of construction, and we just have to go through this process. So that's why I am assuming that, and this is my gut feeling, this is my professional opinion, that we have about a year to a year and a half, and we will know one way or the other what has to happen. At the end of the day, if a couple $1 million has to be spent on the plan, our 100-year plan, to fix it, I don't think that is a bad deal for this community if it ensures we get the full $180 million.
I understand, okay. All right,
Okay, we're looking for a motion to accept the report and authorize the director to spend $100,000 with HDR.
and that is, and so one last question. Council, you're required to also oversee that expenditure, correct?
Nearly all the checks that are signed in the office come across my desk.
Good,
Yes, I
okay.
don't necessarily monitor the contract separately.
Yeah.
But,
Okay, motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
well, we need a motion to approve the contract as opposed to the report.
That's included.
I think you misspoke, but
Possible action to approve the proposed agreement with or without changes and provide direction to staff is what I've got here. So the motion is to approve the agreement and give the director the authority to sign the
Yes.
contract.
Okay, we have a motion, looking for a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. B, discussion and possible action to approve an agreement for professional engineering service with HDR Engineering for preparation of a letter of map revision.
Mr. Chair, back in April of 2018, I brought a budget to this body to develop a letter of map revision for the Truckee River watershed from Reno through Sparks. Part of the reason why I did that was the support of the technical staff of those government agencies, Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County, all supported that notion. And part of the reason was, in the past, the last real floodplain analysis that was done and recorded as a legal document was done in the late 70s, and then some in the early 80s. And we've had lots of letters of map revisions in and throughout the Truckee meadows for 30 years, 40 years almost. I have always been in favor of doing a letter of map revision because what it does, in simple terms, is correct the existing floodplain. We know now, I can say with all assurity, that the existing floodplain elevation is too low. That means anybody building a project in and around the Truckee River watershed through Reno, through Sparks, and if they build it according to the old letter of map or the old base flood elevation, they will flood. In hard terms, that's the situation. The problem is nobody has had the confidence in the modeling capabilities of any professional engineering company in this area, or for the nation for that matter, because the software just didn't exist to do it. The Corps of Engineers, in their modeling capabilities, have upgraded their ability to a very finite and very specific and a very accurate floodplain elevation. They have now, and we have been using this model. HDR has been doing that work for us. It could be done by any competent engineering company in the region, could easily do this. But HDR has been the engineer that I have used for this work. And now we need to publish maps and change the map so that the community knows what the elevation is of the base flood elevation. So we have a very large contract. It's $860,000 to do that work. In communication with our legal counsel, the question came up, can you use 377B funds to do this? Well, one of the things that we will be required to do is to amend the FEMA floodplain elevation when we build our project. And seeing how, as staff, we are pushing forward to build as much of the project as we can, we will be required to make that floodplain change. The way that it will work is we will develop the application. We will then develop a transmittal letter that will be signed jointly by Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County's floodplain managers. So we will have all of our member entities sign off on this. They will, of course, review it as they normally would, but the package will come from us because it will be a consistently calculated and accurate depiction of what happens of the floodplain through those government boundaries. One of the things that will be required for that ultimate floodplain amendment after the project is done is develop an existing letter of or an existing model. So this project, in essence, is developing that existing model.
Jay, can we just stick to the contract and just get that done and all the ancillary things you're saying, what's going to happen? Let's just do the contract and then we can.
I just wanted to be upfront. So the contract is to be able to develop an existing floodplain elevation. It is required by FEMA. It will be required by FEMA. And once we become aware of it, we have to do it. So that's what I'm proposing. And I have spoken to TAC about this on the 24th of August, December 7th of last year, and also on April 11th. So TAC has reviewed that. We had it on the agenda for this past TAC meeting, but we did not get a full quorum, so they were not able to give us their approval. But when voted on by those present, there were no negative votes.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, we're looking for a motion to approve the contract with HDR for $863,000.
And me to
That's
sign.
correct. And also, again, if we could ask
Again, give the
the executive
authority.
director authority. Thank you.
Okay,
So moved as outlined in the staff report and as outlined by council.
Second the motion?
Okay.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Passes unanimously. Okay. C, presentation discussion of an underground storage tank petroleum discharge. Why doesn't this just surprise me? They found a tank underneath there.
It is sort of our luck.
Yeah. Eric?
Eric Sheets for the record. As you're right, it isn't exactly a surprise. That facility has been there for quite some time, and obviously they had heating oil, and that's exactly what we found. So the good news is we took lemons and made it in lemonade. Long story short, this could have been a big environmental disaster. We took care of it within the first hour. We had people on site to mitigate it. The thing is, it does go above the $25,000 that Jay has the right to sign. But with that being said, it was an emergency, so there is an exclusion in our policy for that. But anyway, we've taken care of it. Within a couple days, we had all the dirt remediated and taken to Waste Management. They made a pretty penny on it, that's for sure. But with that being said, there is an underground storage tank fund that's available. It will actually reimburse us, hopefully. It's very likely, 90% plus likely, that we'll get reimbursed about 45,000-ish that this will be for a $250 deductible. So basically taking lemons, making lemonade, taking care of environmental process, and making community better through it.
So the contamination wasn't too bad, it was just mostly the tank and the surrounding area?
Yes, correct. In fact, what happened was at the tail end when we were cleaning up the site, because we did finish, obviously, the site. I do have pictures if you guys would like to see as well. But basically, at the tail end, cleaning it up, there's a little bit of dirt that's left, and we knew this was going to be the next project, so it actually worked out quite well time-wise. But basically, you know, we start seeing some red dye there, and we knew we needed to take care of it. So that's what occurred. I can answer more questions on it, but like I said, it's actually, it's pretty fortuitous, actually, that we got to take care of this at the time that we did. And we're still within budgets, and we had the right team out there to take care of it. So it's good news, I think, all the way around.
Mr. Chair, if I may, there have been some samples taken to try to establish the boundaries of that contamination, and I believe the testing is still out on that. So we were able to remove all of the visibly contaminated soil, but we're taking steps to make sure that that has not migrated beyond that area. So there is a possibility that we may have to do some additional work out there if they find that there's additional contamination.
There is possibility, yes. However, we did get more samples back, actually just yesterday, so sorry, I should have told
Okay,
you.
thank you.
But anyway, so far, everything's negative. So we've taken care of everything that we know to be an issue. And the good news is, we want to take care of this before we deal with a project with the Corps. So it's all nice and clean, and we got a clean slate to work with.
Okay.
So if you'd like, I can show you pictures as well.
I drove by there the other day, the only thing that's up is a tower.
Yeah, so the bell tower was left up. It's actually just outside of our 100-foot terracing that we're gonna look at in the future. If you guys wanna pull that down, we can absolutely do it. I think it was, you know, when we were pulling down the building, it was taking care of the liabilities that we had, you know, there was ample amounts of needles all over the place and things like that. The bell tower wasn't really a liability to us. So anyway, if you want, we can still do that, but it could be turned into a monument if you guys want.
I would just be concerned if there's access to that tower.
Yeah, it's closed off, and
Okay.
there's really no liability. Since the picture's up, I might go ahead and point these out. This was actually what we ended up finding. You can see the red there. Sorry, on the phone we can't show it, but anyway, it's not a huge amount, but it's something we needed to take care of. And so if we slide forward again, this is another view of it. You can see it's actually quite deep, but there's high groundwater in that area. As you can imagine, it's close enough to the river where it's basically the height of the river. So we just wanted to make sure it didn't migrate and cause any issues downstream. One more picture, please. So this was actually the tank. You can see that it being there for, you know, half a century plus, it had obviously corroded. This was crumpled some, but you can still see the holes in there, and that's exactly the issue. As soon as you move some dirt next to it, it will slough away, and then it leaked. Again, this had been leaking for probably decades, so it was good to take care of it. And then last picture, please. This is basically the site now. You can see it's covered over, and we did put a nice, you know, a cobble gravel backfill, and then we did a biomat over that underneath the dirt. So it's, you know, it's going to be structurally fine.
And I just leave the bell tower there until we figure out what we want to do later on.
That's what I thought. I thought it was smartest to take care of the liabilities and, you know, not take away something that maybe somebody wants to turn into something. I don't know. It's
Well, thanks for getting it done so fast, and
Yeah.
and it's cleaned up now. We don't have to worry about that.
exactly.
Mr. Anderson.
And actually, just to echo what our chairman said, thank you for the quick response. Speaking from experience, time is not your friend in those kind of situations, and instead of hesitating, you guys took care of it. So thank you for you and your team doing that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Mr. Harton?
Yes, thank you. Council, I don't, and perhaps I just don't see it, but I don't see a staff report on this. I don't see how we can take action today, not given a staff report, and so that the public can understand what it is we're taking action on.
No, that was put in at the time the agenda was written. We were still up in the air as to the status of some of this. So out of abundance of caution, I put some language in there in regard to applying to the underground tank remediation fund that the state has.
So that, okay,
We're not yet at the point of making an application there, so I don't believe it's necessary today to take action
okay, all
on
right,
this if
thank
you do not wish to.
Thank you. All right.
To clarify, I think we will have to come back to accept that grant possibly. Again, we'll work with Mike to make sure that everything's done appropriately, but we have been in constant communication with NDEP and any of the authorities that we need to.
So, Council, if I may, Mr. Chairman, we don't need to have staff come back to apply for the grant. The staff can apply for the grant and then come back, and basically we look at it as an addition to our budget, an augmentation to the budget.
Yes, I think that's generally correct. And again, we put it in there just out of an abundance of caution.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so to be clear, no action need to be taken today.
Not today.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Thanks, Eric, good job.
Thank you.
Move on to D, presentation discussion of the tentative budget proposal for fiscal year 2019-2020. Lori, you're on.
Good morning. Lori Williams, Senior Financial Analyst for Truckee River Flood Management Authority. And today you've got the regular set of budget documents that we use. And the first is the summary, where we have the combination of the general fund and the capital projects fund all on one page. And you can see that it runs on the left side with the budget for the current year, the actual information in the center two columns, and the budget, the proposed, well, tentative, it's not even proposed at this time, but the tentative budget for 2020 on the right. And what I would like to do, next slide, is to just point out that, as usual, our budget is being built for 2020 with TRFMA goals, the priorities, and strategies and objectives in mind. So everything that we've discussed at board meetings in the past should be reflected in your budget. The other thing is that it is a tentative budget, so between now and next month, when we actually have the final budget, or if we have a regular meeting and we show the proposed budget at that time, there will be some changes, primarily in the salaries and benefits section, because those are continually being revised and updated. So we'll probably have an update to that between now and then. The other thing is perhaps as we go through the budget, you might have some kind of change or addition that you might like to see, so we could work that in at this time.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So the first thing I want to point out is revenue. We have total revenues at the top, but that primarily, as you know, is just the sales tax distribution from Washoe County. And at this time, what we're doing is we're budgeting just under $8.6 million for the year for total revenues. Of that, we have $8.4 million coming from the sales tax. So the sales tax, while it looks in total to be less than what we budgeted for last year, it has nothing to do with the tax. It has most to do with the debt payment, because if you'll recall, 5 years ago, we did, Washoe County refinanced our debt, and what we asked was that the lowest payments be at the beginning of the year, because we were coming out of the recession, and then the payments then increase over years. So this is the first year that it actually really increased. So
What
we're
page are
seeing
you
that.
on, Lori?
We're looking at this, the summary budget, the top budget. Hopefully, it's the top page
Okay.
in the budget of the three.
8.6.
It's 8.6, but that includes other things. It's 8.4 of sales tax. It also includes interest. And you can look on the next page if you'd like it broken down. you can see the 8.6 is actually 8.4 of sales tax. And then there's 150 of interest, rental income, and others.
Mr. Chairman, 8.469898, is that what we're looking at?
No, that's the estimated actual for the current year. Look at the heading at the top. That's what we're expecting to have this year. Budget is at the far right column. See where it says 2020 budget at the
84,400.
heading?
It's this one right here. There's the 84.
Yeah, okay, 8.568,
Yeah.
820, okay. All right, I'm just trying to figure out, because there's nothing up above where
Right.
we can't see anything there, and I'm just trying to figure out what page. I'm sorry, I'm trying to follow along and understand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And so, anyway, as far as the sales tax distribution goes, if you want to continue just looking at that second page for the detail, you'll see that on the infrastructure tax line, which is the first line of the revenue section, you'll see that for the current year budget, we have $9 million budgeted. And we're looking to have about 8.5 actually come in. That is not a reflection of the sales tax. That is just part of the debt payments going up. And so to continue that increase in the debt payments into 2020, you'll see that the total distribution, because Mr. Anderson, you may already are probably very familiar with this, but what we receive in tax distributions is actually the tax that passes through the county. They take out a debt payment for all of the safety bonds that have been issued for the quarter-cent tax in the past. It was actually an 8-cent tax that applies for safety. And then what's left, they distribute to us. So when I talk about a sales tax distribution, it is a net sales tax distribution. And that's why it's, while sales tax is continuing to increase, in our budget, for the time being, it's decreasing because that debt payment is being taken out at a higher rate.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
And I did mention that the salaries and benefits will be updated. So what you see there is what I have gone through and calculated that seems to represent very well what we will be paying. Often Washoe County's is higher because they do budget for a position for an entire year instead of the actual year that you use it. So ours will vary a little bit, and we do adjust our budget to reflect that. Moving down into expenditures, we have a total of $6.3 million in expenditures. That's a combination of salaries, wages, employee benefits, and sales and services rather, and supplies. And of that, that's about $850,000 less than the current year budget, or about 15%. So there is a slight decrease in that, and there are two primary reasons for that. Oh, I'm sorry. It's an increase. I have a typo here, I'm sorry. So there's an increase of $850,000. There are two reasons for that. One is because, as Director Aldean mentioned, there may be possible contingent costs related to the Army Corps of Engineers. So we have plugged in an extra $1 million into the professional services budget in case something comes up this coming year. It may be a future year, but just planning for it, we've got that in there. And that $1 million is offset by a $145,000 decrease in salaries and wages because our staff has shrunk. Also, you'll notice that if you look at the very, well, not the very bottom, but nearly to the bottom, transfers out on your sheet. Oh, you want to change this slide, please? Thank you. Transfers out, we have transfers totaling $4.6 million in the budget. And that is quite different from our current budget of just about $14.5 million. And that's because a lot of the work is continuing to roll from this year to next. And a lot of the work is being done currently. We have the Vista Narrows work, which we've already done about $2.8 million. And that part has decreased slightly from the budget in 19 to 20. And the budget for 19 includes $6.8 million in unallocated. There were some potential projects and work that might have been done this year that we opted to not do. So that's just been completely removed from the budget. So together, that's just about $9.5 million, and that's about the difference between the 2 years. Otherwise, there's pretty much the same work continuing from the current year to the proposed year. In our budget, when we do our budget, we have to make several assumptions. In the current year, we had predicted that we would have continued sales tax distribution growth, which we did. We would have the FEMA home elevation grants begin, that the Vista Narrows work would begin with the engineering and the environmental work, and it did. The core design services, we're kind of waiting for those. They're still in action, but we're not spending money at this time, as Jay explained. And in the fiscal year 2020 budget, we continue with an increase in sales tax growth. That's what we're anticipating. The FEMA home elevations and the Vista Narrows work will also continue. So as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, basically what you have planned for our capital budget, which you'll see in just a minute, is, or which I will discuss, you'll see in your handout in just a minute, is basically the same. It's just rolling from one year to the next as it continues. One thing I would like to point out, if you'll go back to the first page of the budget, where I have the summary, there's the two pages, the two funds, the general fund and the capital projects fund listed. Down near the bottom, we have what are called assignments. Every year, we have assigned money to cover the deductible for a potential insurance claim. We also have all of the assignments for those reserves. We call them reserves technically. It's not a reserve, but we'll call it that for discussion's sake, that are listed in the ICA, and we have added one this year. And you'll see it's pretty significant. It's $18 million. Has been put in as an assignment, as a placeholder for future work at Vista Narrows. It's an estimated $30 million project, which might begin in 2023 or 2024. You know, we have to work that out. But at least that pulls that money out of the bottom line and kind of reserves it for that project. That's a big, big project that we had discussed and planned to do. So that's something I wanted to point out.
Okay.
All right, so moving back to page 2, the general fund, which is this one. We have a beginning fund balance for the budget year, the top of the very right column, of $25.4 million. We're going to be adding revenues, as we discussed a little earlier, of just about $8.6 million. Our expenditures, revenues, and our expenditures and uses, rather, total just about $10.9 million. And that's broken up, as you can see in the subtotals, of salaries and wages, $775,000, benefits just at $399,000, and total services and supplies at just over $5.1 million. And then you have the amount that will be transferred to the capital projects fund of $4.6 million. That leaves an ending fund balance of $23 million. And the $18 million that I just mentioned to you as being assigned is part of that $23 million. So
Okay.
if you want to move to the next page that in your agenda, you have the capital projects fund budget. And its beginning fund balance is $13,853,000. We put, as you know from past experience, and perhaps new board members would like to know, we intentionally keep this low so that the money that the flood project receives retains its flexibility in the general fund. Once you deposit it into the capital projects fund, it cannot be removed. So we try to keep as much as possible in the general fund and only transfer what we need. So quite often, the balances in this fund are very low. So we start out with just over $13,000. We're looking at revenues coming from reimbursements for the Reno Sparks from the Indian colony for the, do you have a question?
No.
Okay. We have the regular,
So hold on, Lori, so the beginning fund balance is 13,853, that's not 13 million?
no, that's 13,000.
Okay, all right,
Yes.
I wanted to make sure that,
Yeah, these are all in single units, so,
okay. thank you.
yes. Yeah, our budget is not that big. So we have the 13,000 coming for the reimbursements for Muno Sparks Indian Colony. We maintain the levy, and they reimburse us for the costs at this point. We have about $1,500 coming from interest income for the monies that are retained in this fund, and we're looking to probably get about $311,000 from the FEMA home elevation grants next year. So that's what we're looking at. And there is the transfer in from the general fund of $4.6 million. And listed below that are the various projects and the expenditures that we expect during the year.
So let me ask you a fast question,
Yes.
Lori, and you may not be able to answer this. I see under the FEMA home elevation grants, 311,000. Does that represent about what we're gonna spend?
No, we do have I believe it's a 50-50 match. I'm working off the top of my head.
50-50,
But we
thank
have
you.
also committed to add additional TURFMA dollars to that because it just is more, we'll be able to do a better job of covering what the public needs.
Understood, thank
So
you.
is that more or less a placeholder, because we don't have anything on the board, do we, for elevating? Do we have homes?
We have one that we're in process with, and Eric can talk to you about others that are coming up.
And I apologize, I've been gone for a couple months, so I'm,
That's fine. No, honestly, this is a great opportunity to update, especially talking about the budget. It's perfect timing. So anyway, we are actually working on one home right now. Part of the process in that is getting all the kinks worked out. So we just finished up the plan set. Actually, I got that over to the contractor yesterday for a bid on the homeowner's behalf. But then as soon as that comes in with a number that we can use for the budget, then we've got another 5 homes that are already,
really?
frothing at the bit to go.
Okay.
And then on top of that, with this 50-50 grant, we've got another 4 homes after that are already guaranteed to have a match as long as we can keep rolling. So anyway, we also, after that, have another 11 homes that might come on as well. So we're chugging forward.
So since I've been gone, have the tax implications been solved?
And that's exactly why it's a benefit to work with FEMA, because we don't want to pretend to be tax people, or I don't. But anyway, we have an email from FEMA, from their regional director, that basically says, as long as we're coordinating with them, first off, the FEMA grant money is not taxable. That's already a definite exclusion. The match money, FEMA is also saying is not taxable. So that's why even if it was a 50-50 match, even if we have to put in a little bit extra, we're in a much better situation if the homeowners don't have to pay, 30% tax or
Right,
so on it.
right.
And I'm making up a number there, but that's why we do want to go through the FEMA home elevation grant.
No, that's
So,
all good
so
news.
let me just ask a fast question here. Regardless of what FEMA says, what does the IRS say? Because the
So-
two agencies are
Right.
completely different agencies. And
And-
remember, and I know for a fact that, because I've had conversations with FEMA, and I've had conversations with BLM, and I've had conversations with the IRS in the past, and none of them will give you an answer that they, even in writing, that they are held to.
Right. The closest we have is that email that is, I was surprised to even put that in writing, right? But at that point, it's basically between FEMA and IRS.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, what does it seem to be the average that's coming back, Eric, as the cost to elevate a dwelling unit?
Well,
Approximately. $20,000, $50,000,
no,
$150,000?
you're up in the 180,000 range.
$180,000. Okay, thank you.
Right. So,
Okay, thanks, Eric.
Mr. Chair, I might quickly add that $300,000 is money that we always anticipated that we would be spending. In other words, we didn't ever expect in our program conception that we would have any infusion of money from the government. It was always local. So the mere fact that FEMA is offsetting now a portion of our expenditures makes our program even more robust.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask a question. So out of this home elevation process, how many do we think we're going to be seeing ultimately come before us? Do you know?
Sorry, Eric Sheets again. I should have stayed down here. Ultimately, we are looking at probably about 40 to 50 homes. But that's in the Truckee Meadows area. If we're also looking downstream, we've got another 20 to 30 homes that we'll have to look at in mitigation potentially, which is a different issue. But
Downstream, Lockwood?
yeah, Lockwood and Wadsworth.
Wadsworth.
Yeah, there's also a couple homes right along the river in between there as well.
Well,
But
we tried to fix that a couple years ago, and they wanted nothing to do with it.
they didn't want to have anything to do with the berm at that point, but
Yeah.
we'll still need to mitigate. The nice part about those homes, those should be much cheaper because they're already modular. So they're designed, they were put there in the first place in a modular fashion, a mobile fashion, if you will.
If I may, I hate to interrupt, but we've wandered a little bit from the agenda off
we
of kind
have,
of the
sorry.
budget of this to
Yeah.
home elevation, and since we're talking about areas outside of our elevation program, we
But we're
probably
actually
should
talking
stop.
about the funding.
Yes.
That we see in here.
Yes,
I know
those are a different budget item
we're a little bit out.
than
I
here,
agree.
so, yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
No. And we did check out the tax liability issue. And after Eric said that, it was really hard to believe. He said, I have it in writing, which was really hard to believe. But it is in writing, and other agencies have actually not done 1099s based on that, and there so far have been no repercussions from that. So that seems to be like a go. Good news to us. All right, so moving from the revenues on down to expenditures, you'll see that it's basically a mirror of the current year budget. It's just continuing from one year to the next, or just additional funding so that the same activities can continue for like the RSIC levy. So there's really no new things to point out, except perhaps that we did increase the budget for the Wells pedestrian bridge just slightly, well, not slightly, I guess it's by 25% to $500,000, just to make sure that we have funding adequate to do what we have planned. So that is basically the capital budget. It ends with $23,000, again, a low amount, just as I explained. So if you have any questions about the budget, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Any questions or comments? So you're looking for a motion to approve the tentative budget?
Yes,
and so
what
you can
what
move
is
forward?
going to happen, this is the tentative budget, and I will be submitting it to the state of Nevada, to the Department of Taxation. And then if we have a regular board meeting next month, we will bring the revised tentative to you, and then we have the hearing on the 23rd. If we don't have a meeting, a regular meeting, then I'll take the revised tentative to the budget hearing, and I'll explain all of the changes there.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Looking for a motion?
Move to approve the budget, a tentative budget as presented by staff.
Okay, we have a motion, looking for a second.
Second.
Ms. Herman, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? See none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mayor, are you still there?
I am.
Okay, was that?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Passes unanimously. Excuse me. We'll move on to E, monthly report on the authority's financial status and related financial activities.
You have the financial reports as of February 28th. There are no outstanding or unusual activity to report, nothing to point out. I will just say that everything is on budget. There's nothing that has strayed from the budget, and if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Okay, any questions or comments? Looking for a motion just to accept the report.
So moved.
We have a motion, looking for a second?
Second.
And a second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mayor?
Aye.
Okay. Passes unanimously. Move on to F, review of monthly encumbrance report.
This is the monthly encumbrance report that is just prepared so that you can be advised of the purchase orders and contracts and other agreements that we have ongoing. And there's been nothing significant added to the list. If you have any questions or any concerns about anything listed here, I'd be happy to address them.
Okay, any questions or comments? See none, looking for a motion to accept the report.
So moved.
We have a
Second.
motion
Second?
and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, board, isn't this backwards here? Board members and request future agenda items, should they come after public comment?
No, we've normally done it in that order.
Really? Okay. Board member comments, requests for future agenda items?
Mr.
Anything from the board?
Mr. Chair, I do have one.
Okay.
And that is, I'm thinking that it would be nice if we could have two items on a workshop. It would be the going forward, a presentation that I made to this body. Well, actually didn't make it to this body because we didn't have a quorum in January. But I would like to do that and do that again and get some direction from the board as to the board's feelings about moving forward and how we're going to do that. I would also like a discussion on the review process that this board sees staff doing and undertaking with respect to subdivision development and whatnot. And I would like to have the deputy director on board, so that would probably mean that we have, it's going to be sometime in June, July, or August. I will be probably making my last day the end of summer, the end of August, so that there's sufficient time to go spend some time with the new deputy when they come on board. And then that person will also have the ability to hear the thoughts and comments of the board members. So I don't know, summer is a real lousy time to do this, but I think it would be good if we could find a day sometime June, July, or August that this board can all meet and be here. And so I will be sending out an email asking for some tentative dates, and hopefully, once we get this workshop set, everybody will, block that off in their calendar and make sure that we have time.
Mr. Hartung?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Jay, I heard you mention subdivision development. So are you suggesting that this agency enter in to a planning role that, explain.
The IC,
May I explain the ICA?
sure, go ahead.
Under the interlocal cooperative agreement, it was anticipated that all of the local governments would amend their development codes to allow for review by the flood authority for development in the floodplain or potentially impacted by that. It is not an approval review. It's simply a review and comment. We've been doing that on an informal basis, but the procedure has never been clarified either from the various governments or on our part. And so, but the reason that hasn't moved forward is it just wasn't coming forward with the slowed economy. That wasn't really necessary. We're starting to get questions now. And so as a discussion amongst ourselves, it appears that it may be time to discuss the mechanism for making some of those changes.
And how,
But the
yeah,
ICA is very clear that it is not an approval review. In other words, it was never anticipated that the flood authority would be able to turn down or put conditions on any development.
Here's my fear. If we give any kind of recommendations, and for whatever reason, something occurs, they're going to look back at this agency and say, you guys made this recommendation, we followed your recommendation, ergo you're responsible along with us. Concern, just note.
And on that note, we'd like to be informed when you are going to testify, so I don't find out afterwards.
We are currently working on that premise right now, Mr. Chair, and that was after discussions that you and I had several months ago, that anytime I get a request, I will let you know that has come across my desk.
Okay, all right. Well, for me, I would think the workshop would be as soon as possible, whether it's May or June, doesn't matter. And then, are you planning on bringing forward a couple of candidates? Or what is your plan on that?
Well, the job actually closed yesterday, and we have 3 candidates that have applied that look to be acceptable. As in other words, they met all the requirements, and Washoe County Human Resources is determining that. So I don't have the names of the individuals at this time, but they will be, we will have an interview process at the end of this month. I have asked all the Public Works directors to be part of that interview process. Personnel has a woman, and I cannot pronounce her last name. Carla is her first name, and she's with Washoe County Personnel. And she will be on the interview committee along with our legal counsel and myself. And I was going to make the recommendation and then hire that individual. I wanted to make sure that the individual had the technical capabilities, had the governmental experience to do that. I felt that we talked about the possibility of board members being on the interview panel. At this time, I think it's better that we just present a deputy director to you and let you get to know them.
I would say that we would approve your recommendation or not before you hire them.
Okay,
Under the structure, I guess the organization, this is a position that is delegated to the executive director to hire. So we were not planning to bring that before the board.
We can, though.
I can look into that. We operate under the county's regulations as far as hiring.
So how about when we hired you? You were brought before us.
Yeah, I'm an exception, and so is the executive director. Those 2 positions are hired directly,
Okay.
directly by the board. Everything else is hired by the executive
Okay,
director.
well, I would just appreciate a lot of communication on what's going on and how the process is going.
Well, we're going to look into the possibility of bringing that individual before the board.
Okay.
And I don't know what the answer is going to be, but
I won't hazard a guess. We'll have to
Yeah.
comply with county regulations on that.
Okay. Mr. Hartung?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my concern is that the obvious succession plan means that person moves into the executive director's position. And while I see your head shaking no, Mr. Aldean, the point is that that's kind of the idea that we've had as a board, is to say, okay, we're gonna bring somebody in as the deputy. You're going to, and you mentioned this earlier, so you said that, you were gonna stay around and make sure that they sort of knew what was going on. That infers to me that person is going to take over, even if it's an interim slot of the director's position. So I think it's incumbent upon us to try to understand who these applicants are and who's the person and the personality that we're going to be working with, because that ultimately becomes our executive director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, and
Mr.
I would
Anderson?
like to agree with that I think if that's the direction, that it's going to be that succession plan, I would believe it's important that this group's involved in that.
again, I've not had any problem with that. It's the reason why I've been talking about this for a good amount of time. My plan was there would be a senior level individual that could help with the agency and the leadership of the agency not necessarily meaning that they would become the executive director, because I would never make that representation to anyone or to this board, but at least the individual would be enlightened to the point that they would have all the strategies down, they would understand the direction that staff has been going thus far. And again, that's the reason why I would like to hold the workshop when they are aboard, so that that individual could have that benefit of acquiring that knowledge. But never with the intention that they would become the executive director, maybe perhaps an interim for several months while the board deliberates as to what it wants to do with the executive director's position. That was always my intent.
Okay, all right, anything else? Okay, any other comments from members of the board? Okay, I'll open up the public comment. Anybody in the public wishing to speak at this time? See none, we'll bring it back to the authority. And without objection, we are adjourned.